all you need to do is put a self-resetting fuse at the start of each of these wires, and then we put each of those wires in a fiberglass sleeve so that it's much more resistant to impact. And it's also, if there's anything here generating a lot of heat, so say you're discharging the battery and you have a pad that gets really hot, you don't want that to melt the insulation and allow this wire here to short circuit against that and cause a short between that group of cells. So we tried to suggest this to the manufacturers, and they were really resistant. They were like, oh, well, that's just going to add extra cost. It's not necessary. We've been doing it this way for years and years and years. So be it. Another issue with battery management circuits is that people often like to have multiple batteries in their bike, and they like to plug them in series. So they might get two 24-volt batteries to make a 48-volt e-bike, or two 36 volts for 72 volts. Well, unfortunately, I meant to redo this surgery so you could actually see it. But if each of these batteries has its own circuit with a switch that can turn it on and off. If you have two of those connected together, one of the batteries is always going to go flat before the other one. It's an inevitability, even if they're only seconds apart. You still have a case where one battery is trying to discharge, and the other battery has a switch that says no more current. But there's already current flowing when that happens, and the induction, there's inductive energy stored in all of those wires. And what happens is when that switch tries to turn off the battery management circuit, you get this huge voltage spike across the BMS, and that will fry all the chips that are on the BMS. So this, the first time I witnessed this was when we were doing the electric skateboards again back in the very early days in 2004, 2005. And so the balancing electric skateboard I had in VEVA was running these lithium batteries, and I had two of them in series. And then at one point it stopped working, and we opened it up, and you see every single MOSFET on that whole row is blown from the result of the series connected BMS circuit. And there's a very easy solution to this, which is just to have a large diode in parallel with the outputs. And we've, again, suggested that to the manufacturers, rather than include on the circuit board. But in their mind, they're supplying just the one battery to the electric vehicle, and not aware of how it actually gets used in the context of do-it-yourself e-bike or electric vehicle builders. Big problem with battery management circuits is that they're to protect the cells, but they also need to be powered up in order to do this protection. And so lithium batteries have a very low rate of self-discharge, which is nice. But the battery management circuit draws power from that battery in order to be powered to monitor what's going on with those cells. And we know that lithium batteries don't like to be over-discharged. Once you overdrain it less than 1 volt, you destroy the cell. We have dealt with a number of different types of battery management circuits. And some of them, like that switch capacitor one that I showed you, did a very good job of balancing the cells, but it draws 5 milliamps of current. So if you have a circuit on your battery drawing 5 milliamps, here I've got a column just showing how long it would take to drain 1 amp hour out of the battery. So at 5 milliamps, every week you lose an amp hour out of your battery. If you have an 8 amp hour battery, that means if you have it fully charged and then you go on vacation for 2 months and you come back, your battery will be flat. It just got flat, but it hadn't had a chance to go down to 0 volts, so you could safely recharge it. Let's say you rode around in an e-bike and drain the battery till the BMS cut out, and then you store it. Well, now the battery's already flat to begin with. It's only going to take a couple days before it drops down to the point of killing individual cells. And there's sometimes these circuits, once one cell drops too low, but instead of drawing 5 milliamps, it might draw a smaller amount of current, 300 microns to 50 microns. But even at these lower currents, 4 months, in some cases, that could be a really long time. If you use your bike every week, there's no chance you're going to sit in storage for 4 months. We sell a lot of stuff to Canada, and a lot of Canada, you can only ride for 4 months of the year, and for 8 months, people are leaving their bike in storage. And so if we don't make it very clear to them that they need to continuously plug their battery into a charger, then the battery management circuit's going to drain the battery flat, and it'll continue to drain it flat mercilessly until it's totally shot. All the cells are goners. It's funny, because if you try to drain the battery, the BMS prevents you from draining it too flat externally. Like if I plug in a toaster to a battery or an e-bike, the battery management will cut it off so that none of the cells over-discharge. But internally, it keeps drawing that little bit of current and then won't turn itself off. So we probably had, I guess, at the end of the day, maybe seen 100 cases of people's batteries, lithium batteries, becoming write-offs for having been left for too long in storage, either because people weren't aware of this issue or that they just forgot about it. And And it's a problem that's really much more pronounced the more of your current battery management circuit draw. So this is us actually measuring the current draw of a particular BMS, and it's there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and sometimes it's very low, and then it draws high current for these spikes of time. But it means that to be practical from the point of view of a consumer item, you need to be able to ignore the battery for 6 to 8 months, and it means you need a BMS that has a current draw in that 50 microamp range. And most of the ones that came with these battery packs were higher than that. So we had actually a number of these go flat in our own storage, and I'm as guilty as anyone for it. And in this case, we had some where the cells were sitting at maybe 1.1 volts each, maybe some were 0.5, some were 1.8. So we thought, well, let's just see what happens if we very carefully try to feed current into the battery to charge it up. Can we revive it or get some kind of value out of all these dozens and dozens of batteries that have been allowed to self-discharge for too long on our own shelves? And the answer is no. In this case, I don't know what happened. The cells leaked electrolyte, and it turns out that the electrolyte that's inside these particular lithium cells actually dissolves the plastic casing that the cell is in. So suddenly we have this soggy mess of semi-dissolved plastic all over our battery test station from our battery repair test. So we had those problems with battery management circuits early on, and so back then I was thinking, well, maybe we should just make our own battery management circuit, because we understand the issues. Clearly the vendors who are buying the batteries don't. And so here's some early prototypes of one that does the switch capacitor, measuring voltages across cells and can do the balancing and everything. But then the assumption was that the companies manufacturing the batteries have far more resources to throw at figuring out the circuitry and getting it dialed in. It really wouldn't be worth our while to do that if then it would just be available off the shelf inexpensively with the battery vendors. So that process was sort of abandoned, and the hope was in 2006, well, yeah, just give it a year or two and the BMS situation would be great. A year or two, things are not great. This is jumping back in. This is another funny issue where this battery had a pretty decent battery management circuit on it. So the battery management circuit to prevent it from overcharging. I woke up one morning after having plugged in this battery to a charger to find the battery all swelled up on my bedroom floor. And I was really curious, how could that happen? And I measured, and clearly the cells have been overcharged and they swelled up. That happens when they get overcharged. But then the battery management circuit should have prevented that. And then I measured the voltage of the charger, and the charger was giving 42.2 volts, so it seemed fine. And I was really perplexed. It didn't seem like the charger voltage was too high. There was no physical damage to the BMS circuit. And the only thing I did notice is the charger was buzzing quite a bit. And so I then, out of curiosity, flipped my multimeter to AC instead of DC to look at what was going on the AC output line, and it had 2 kilovolts. And so somewhere on the battery charger circuit board, some trace or something had enabled a very high voltage, high frequency signal to get coupled on the output. And 2 kilovolts at high frequency, well, that could just destroy every chip that's on this board. So when you go into DC mode of your multimeter, any AC signal is not even visible, and I just got this steady 42.2 volt output. So here, the BMS maybe could have done its job, but it's not really designed to handle 2 kilovolts of over voltage. Sorry if you try to charge it with a 60 volt battery, should be able to cut that off. Sorry, a 60 volt charger, but with 2 kilovolts is more than it could take. At the very early days of the UBC electric bike, we bought 10 lithium polymer battery packs. That was our first big and only club project. And the lithium polymer was really exciting. It was by far the lightest chemistry, and they were available in these nice aluminum boxes. And of the 10 batteries that we bought, 8 of them were pretty much toast within the first 2 months.